You're probably hearing a lot about fraud these days. Why all the buzz? Unfortunately, fraud attacks, especially ones that take place online, are more common than ever before and are happening every single day around the globe. Fraud is something that we all need to take seriously, but don't panic. I am Carla Ricci. I'm manager of community development and for Tandia Financial Credit Union. And in the spirit of Fraud Awareness Month, we've recognized the importance of educating our community, our members, about the critical topic of fraud prevention. So, what better way to achieve this than by engaging with experts in the field? Today, we are privileged to have Joel Grannum joining us to discuss strategies for keeping our accounts secure, avoiding falling victim to fraud. As we navigate through Fraud Awareness Month, there's no better time than now to connect and empower ourselves with the knowledge needed to protect against financial crime. So we're going to just dive right into this essential conversation with Joel and explore particular or practical and explore practical ways to safeguard our financial well-being. So Joel is CPP, is a risk management and loss prevention specialist for CUMIS Insurance, part of the Cooperators Group of companies. CUMIS is a trusted partner to credit unions and their members for protection, personal, financial, and business. And in doing so, it creates financial security and promotes the growth and success of the credit union system in Canada. Joel joined CUMIS in 2016, and part of his role involves developing risk management resources for credit unions on topics such as, you guessed it, cybersecurity, incident response, as well as fraud mitigation and awareness. Prior to joining CUMIS, he spent 12 years working in the security industry in various capacities. He is currently the vice chair of ASIS International Banking and Financial Services Steering Committee and is the member of the International Association of Financial Crime Investigators. So naturally, there is no one better than to discuss this topic with us today than Joel. So welcome to our first masterclass series of workshops and being here to really help provide support to our community.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carla. Happy to be here.
Great. Okay, so we're just going to dive right in. We're just going to have a very casual conversation. I've prepped Joel with some questions. This feels very weird to say because Joel is my husband's name as well. So I feel like this was just like a kismet relationship from the beginning. But Joel, when you're thinking about it and when we talk about fraud awareness and how important it is, how and why is fraud awareness so important, especially at the individual level?
Yeah, I mean, fraud awareness is important, especially on the individual level, because really, because fraud is so pervasive in our society, right?
Mhm.
We encounter fraudsters texting us, emailing
Mhm.
us, calling us. The fraudsters are on social media. They're trying to
Mhm.
access our online banking, our online shopping experiences on Amazon or Marketplace and that. So it's pervasive. And really, the best way an individual can protect themselves is through awareness, knowing that the fraud is out there, where it is, what are their tactics, so that you could
Mhm.
recognize it and hopefully not fall victim.
It's so true. It's actually a little bit sad sometimes because you think like as innocently as, shopping online or, I feel being in the banking industry and knowing and understanding that there are people we're hearing these reports all the time. I have to still remind myself as an individual, like, oh no, like stop and look. Is this really a legit email? Am I expecting an Amazon package? Would
Yes.
Amazon text me? Like, you just is that self-awareness that again, I'm a little bit privileged, I would say, because I see this and we hear about this in the industry. But if you're not, you know, and as an individual, I think it's really important to know and understand like what role do you play in preventing fraud? Because it's very easy to kind of, yes, like not fall victim to phishing scams and all those things, but sometimes they are so well crafted that you need to be kind of like the first line of defense, right? So as an individual, what role do you play in preventing fraud in like your personal, professional life? Like, I don't want to be the one that clicks the phishing email and then, I'm on the naughty list and the whole system goes down. So
Right.
how do you protect yourself or be more aware or what can you do to kind of prevent it as an individual?
Yeah, I mean, so very true. And I mean, I think we all have a role to play, right?
Mhm,
So, like I'll say, organizations providing services, they need to be providing the latest in security
mhm,
best practices to protect their clients if they want to, responsibly provide those services. Obviously, the government plays a role in investigating and collecting reports, sharing information, creating awareness, establishing regulations and best practices for all to follow. But to your question, I believe the individual plays the most important role, right?
mhm,
And that's in both personal and professional life,
mhm,
because, the organizations could put in place all the security features and
mhm.
tools possible. But if a person is able to be tricked to provide their legitimate access to a fraudster, then there's not much anyone can do, right? So that
Yeah.
ability to be tricked is an awareness issue. It's
Mhm,
the lack of awareness that causes that victim to be tricked and that social engineering to occur.
mhm. And it's, I think it's important to kind of know, like it's, they are so sophisticated and they are ever changing. So it, you kind of feel a little like shameful if you are tricked because you're kind of like, oh my God, how did I pay attention? But it's, they are ever changing. Like they are changing with as fast as technology. They're getting more advanced of technology. There's AI. There's a lot of things that can contribute to kind of putting you in the situation where you're not. So I think it is very important that you kind of in your personal, and like you said, if all these if your employer or these things are put in place for you, it's just a matter of like how are you actually using them effectively, because you are the first line of defense. So if it starts with you, and then hopefully these resources that people or put in place help mitigate it a little bit more, make it a little bit easier for you to catch, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about, again, being the first line of defense, what are common signs of fraud that you think individuals should be aware of in their daily activities? What are some things that you see that, we should kind of maybe stop and think, like I always want to say like stop, drop and roll because I feel like
Yeah.
that's what we should do. Like it's a fire, but it
Yeah.
should be kind of the same, stop, be aware, stay secure. Like what are some things? So what are some common things that you've kind of encountered or can share?
Yeah, and it's a good point. Like, no matter how sophisticated the AI and all that is getting, a lot of times it does still come down to sort of just tricking someone on something more basic. It's not the
Hmm.
advanced things a lot of times. So it's a great question. And when it comes to the signs of fraud, I think there's a few rules to live by, right?
Hmm.
The first is obviously the golden rule, right? If it sounds too good to be true,
Yeah,
it probably is.
it
So like,
probably is.
yeah. So
Yeah.
like you were saying, right? It's just so for those, you just slow down, investigate further. Does this make sense? Why would someone offer this to me?
Hmm.
Ask someone else you trust, because a lot of times we get caught up in the heat of the moment or the excitement if it's a good
Hmm.
opportunity, something like that. So again, if it sounds too good to be true, you need to pause and think a little bit.
Hmm.
And then the next thing is sort of related, right? It's
Hmm.
pressure. A
Hmm.
very common sign of fraud is some sort of pressure or time constraint, right? So, like I was alluding to in an investment scam, they may tell you to act now to take
Hmm.
advantage of some time limited opportunity. In a
Hmm.
romance scam, they may say that they need to
Hmm.
borrow money because their loved one has fallen ill or they want to
Hmm.
come see you as soon as they can. In what I call authoritative scams, they may say that you need to act now or face
Hmm.
penalties from the CRA or be
Hmm.
deported or arrested by
Yeah.
some government officials and on and on and on.
Yeah.
So the pressure they apply is meant to make you act now and think
Hmm.
later rather than
Hmm.
slow down and pause like we've been talking about. So
Hmm.
another, I think, common sign is that pressure. Another thing is giving out information on an incoming
Hmm.
call, right?
Hmm.
So if someone
Yeah.
calls you and says that they're from your bank or they're from Microsoft or
Hmm.
from Amazon and they need to verify your account or verify your details or confirm your transactions or
Hmm.
your computer has a virus, whatever it is, I just recommend saying, thank you. I will call the number that I have on file for that
Hmm.
organization and I'll follow up that way, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it's so true. It's so true. Like you it's that urgency or that like oh my God, like I gotta do like the CEO scam, right? Like is my CEO gonna ask me to go buy 14 gift cards to all these places? Like is that, is that the normal thing? Like I interact with our CEO, he's great, but like I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be kind of coming to me to ask me to buy gift cards. There's other channels, but you don't wanna I would never be like, no, I'm not doing that. But it's kind of like, okay, is this actually legit? Maybe I should verify
Verify.
before going out and buying these things because it creates that urgency, like the authoritative, the like CRA, like things that you're
Yeah.
like, I don't want to mess up, so I'm gonna do it. Meanwhile, these guys are like laughing over there that you gave them kind of like the keys, right? So,
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned gift cards because I think that's
mhm,
probably the last one I'll highlight is that I think
yeah,
it always sort of boggles the mind because you do see those scams where they make them go and buy gift cards and that. So I just
mhm,
say, gift cards are never legitimate. What I mean by that is if someone asks you to pay with a gift card
mhm,
or provide
mhm,
a gift card uh, for any reason, it's very likely to be fraud because legitimate organizations generally do not request payments in
yeah.
the form of gift cards. So I think once you hear that gift card, major red flag.
Yeah, major red flag. Major red flag. Yeah, yeah. It's like dating. I mean, I
Yeah,
haven't dated in a very long time, but that's the new trend. Like red flag, beige
red
flag. Like
flag. Yeah,
we should know. Like don't do it. Don't do it. Right.
absolutely.
And it is kind of nice because, I would say in the recent years, like even like in shows, like there's like a lot of shows that have been on Netflix that they do highlight these things, right? I think like, what was it, the Tinder swindler? Like that was
Yeah.
like a really good example of fraud and how they create urgencies in the romance scams and how it becomes so escalated. So I think we have as a society done a really good job of like bringing awareness and talking about it and, but I do think it's still in the back of someone's mind. Oh, like I would never fall for that. Like that's not something I would fall for. How can they not see the red flags? So I think, as an individual, like what can you do? How do you stay informed? Like I know like we see like anti-fraud stuff. We have great partners like CUMIS who share information with us. But like as a regular individual, like how do you stay informed and updated about like the latest tactics or scams or whether people how people are kind of being informed of what's going on, like what the latest things are.
Yeah, I love this. And it's good points you're making there. I think
Hmm.
first, you need to develop the interest, right? You need to
Hmm.
recognize the importance of protecting yourself.
Hmm.
And then you'll find, like you said, the information actually is all around us these days. It's incredible.
Hmm. Hmm.
Pretty much any organization we interact with online has a page dedicated to fraud awareness, security, privacy protection. It's there. Just
Yeah.
how often do we go to those pages and and find them?
Hmm.
But they're there
Yeah.
nowadays, and like you said, it's on our on shows on Netflix and things like that.
Hmm.
But Tandia has a great page dedicated to helping
Hmm.
members stay safe and protecting themselves and their information online.
Yeah.
Social media, whether it's Facebook,
Hmm.
LinkedIn, all of these
Hmm.
websites have pages dedicated to protecting yourself while using their platforms, including tips on what to look
Hmm.
out for and how the fraud could occur on their platforms.
Hmm.
Amazon, the same, and on and
Yeah.
on. So the first thing I say is the information is out there and it's
Hmm.
actually readily available. But we first need to take responsibility to recognize the importance and seek out the information. And then beyond the pages I just mentioned, there's also government websites. I
Hmm.
love the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center.
Yeah.
The Canadian Center for Cybersecurity has a lot of great information.
Hmm.
Your local police detachment or police service likely has a lot of good info on their website.
Hmm.
I even check out international. I think it's the
Yeah.
UK government's National Cybersecurity Center. Lots of great information and useful
Hmm.
information there. And I'm a big podcast guy, so I'm always sort of talking about this podcast I love. It's called Hacking Humans,
What do you mean your podcast that you love is not Tandia Talks Money? No, I
and
had to
this,
do a
of
plug
course,
there. I'm just joking. I'm just joking.
but they're
But
great.
yeah,
Yeah,
no, it's true. No, you're so right. Like and you don't even realize it, but like everybody has kind of like a fraud awareness, fraud protection piece, like exactly like even Amazon, right? So
yep,
I think like some of the links that you kind of mentioned, like the anti-fraud awareness and the CRA website, and even some international ones, I'm going to link those like in the video
perfect.
notes here so that people know. like one, they're legit, like it's not a spoofed page.
Yeah.
So we will link the right ones, and just to actually see the information, because it's it's really eye opening. And again, I think like being in a position from a financial institution, like we're around this, we see this all the time. We're very well educated in it, but it's making sure that our community is too. So like we've done a little fraud awareness campaign over the month of March on our social channels, on LinkedIn, just to kind of make it relatable. Like these are relatable things that happen, and you don't anticipate that you're going to fall victim. And when you look at it from the outside of like, oh my, how did they fall for that? Like, are they crazy? But it is so easy. So there is no shame in it. And
Absolutely.
it's important to know and see, like, because 100%, I will admit, watching the Tinder swindler, I was like, how are you not understanding that they're coming? Like, he's not legit.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you're in it, you're kind of like they prey on these vulnerabilities, right? So when you think about this, and when you think about kind of people in our community, like what are the most vulnerable areas where, you know, individuals might unknowingly expose themselves to fraud? Like I know in previous conversations that I've had with other experts, it's, you know, they mentioned to me, you know, putting your kid's birthday, like you're posting an innocent birthday of like, hey, it's Susie's birthday today and it's on March 14th and this is what you're saying. Like you're opening it up to information that, you know, like, okay, so there's a password I might try. 0314 Susie, right? Like whatever
Right.
it might be. So I think it's, and when she mentioned that to me, I kind of stopped and I was like, oh, you're so right. Like I really post like birthdays, anniversaries, like things like that. So just maybe not being like I don't think we should tell people like they can't post these things, but you know, being aware of who's viewing it, right? So
Yeah.
what are some other vulnerable areas that you've kind of seen that we kind of open ourselves up a bit to it?
Yeah, honestly, when it comes to unknowingly exposing, like, or opening ourselves up in that way, I think it probably has to be social media, right?
Yeah,
And the
for
reason
sure.
I say social media is
Yeah,
just because so many frauds can begin there, right? Like when you
yeah.
look at, like you said, the information people tend to share on social media,
Hmm.
you can find out quite a bit. So, you know,
Yeah,
LinkedIn may tell you
yeah.
where someone works, their job title, who their coworkers are, maybe even who they report
Hmm.
to. You mentioned the CEO scam earlier.
Yeah,
Also on Facebook, you may be able to tell where they live,
yeah,
who they're related to, maiden names, like you said,
yeah.
birthdays, things like that.
Hmm.
So with all that information, fraudsters can really craft some really targeted emails. They could build a
Hmm.
profile to steal someone's
Um,
identity. Also, they could send you a phishing link in a private message, or
hmm.
if you're selling something on the marketplace, they could sell you a fake payment, direct you to a
Hmm.
fake banking page so that they
Yeah.
could steal your login information and use it to gain access to your account.
It's
Um,
so true. That happened to my dad.
really?
My parents sold their house last year, and he was selling some stuff on Marketplace. Like they were trying to declutter and get kind of rid of stuff. They downsized, and somebody sent an e-transfer, but it wasn't a e-transfer for the money. It was the request for money to be taken out.
Right.
So they
I see
caught
that.
it right away, luckily, and their financial institution helped out with that. But it's quite funny because now it's made my parents like super vigilant
Vigilant? Yeah.
on social media. And ironically, just my mom's birthday's coming up March 18th. And last week she called me panicked. She's like, I think something happened to my Facebook. Somebody hacked it. Everybody's wishing me a happy birthday. And it was like March 6th. And I'm like, what? But it ended up just being a friend that messaged. And then it just like went viral from there. So nothing was happened. But because of their experience, she has become super heightened on kind of anything that's a little off or anything that's a little um, not the norm. Like she thought she got hacked, but it was really just one of her friends mistaking her birthday. But
No,
I
yeah.
think it's important because you don't realize how you take for granted. Like you're selling some stuff. Marketplace is meant to be like a really great form. I call it like the modern day garage sale.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like it's a place where you are vulnerable. You're giving out an address, you're meeting up in a place, you could be accepting an e-transfer that somebody's requesting money from you. Yeah, it's social media is great, but social media is also a little unnerving sometimes when you think of everything that you do share.
And everything that you do on it,
Yeah.
right? So that's the
Yeah.
thing. Like, so yeah, you
Yeah.
interact with your friends, you sell things, a lot of romance scams start on there, like
Yeah.
everything. So that's why, like,
Yeah.
for the question, it has to be, I think, social media, because the opportunities there, it's nearly limitless, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. Well, I was just going to ask you if you can share a personal experience, but I just shared one. But were you like, is there a time where you felt like you were able to identify or prevent scam, where you felt like, oh my gosh, like being in the job that you are, like, have you ever like noticed something and maybe like didn't act right away, or you kind of had to stop and think and like it just caught you a little bit off guard? Like, I know, like, definitely I've had that. Like, I called like a travel place one time. I was trying to book a flight. The flight on WestJet was like super good deal, but it had like limited seats. So then I Googled a number, called it, and then it was I went like all the way through and it was exactly that, like, this is too good to be true. Like, this is
Yeah.
something is weird. And they wanted like my visa number. And I just had to stop and be like, but no, I'm gonna just call you back. Like, it just was too good to be true. And I stopped it. And I think thankfully, but I was like right into it. And I thought, I'm like, oh, this is great. They're going to book us flights. They're going to get us all in the same seats. And then all of a sudden I was like, no, 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 no. Why couldn't I do it here? But all of a sudden with this person, I can. Like, this makes no sense. So I think, again, yeah, like it's,
And you're speaking to the point that I was saying earlier, is that usually that's what's involved, is that excitement, right?
mhm.
You were
Yeah,
at the beginning just seeing the great discount, and it's exactly
yeah,
what you're looking for, where you want to
yeah,
go. And so
yeah,
that's how it actually happens, because you get caught
yeah,
up in that, and
yeah,
it sort of, the blinders get on, right? But
yeah, yeah,
thankfully, in that case, you're able to slow down and realize, well, hold
yeah,
on here, all
yeah.
all of this doesn't make sense. Um, so honestly, for me, not really. I can't think of too many personal.
It's because you're a cybercrime like superhero.
Yeah, I get, like everybody else, I get all the
Mhm.
dozens of phishing text messages and
Mhm.
emails, people telling me that my
Mhm.
bank account is compromised, or
Yeah,
my Netflix account, or Costco, or whatever it is, right?
yeah, yeah,
So obviously, I
yeah,
just block and delete those messages,
yeah,
and I guess prevent fraud that way. But
yeah.
I don't know, nothing else really comes to mind. I've had people approach me in parking lots, this counterfeit frauds, counterfeit products, right?
Oh,
And telling
yeah,
me that
yeah.
they work in sales or something, and they have overstock, and that there's electronics or speakers or something, and they
Right.
need
And
to
you're
sell it
just,
by the end of the day, and so for some incredible discount. Obviously, I just say I'm not interested. The product is likely
yeah.
stolen or counterfeit,
Oh, for sure. For
right?
sure.
So I don't
Yeah.
have too many stories, but
That's
like you
good.
said,
That's
yeah,
one less person being a victim of fraud. So that's really good. That's really good.
yeah,
But yeah, no, it's true. And like I said, like, I'm in the industry kind of. But yeah, like, it's still like you said, like, it was the excitement, it's this, it's that, it's like, oh, this is, and all of a sudden I remember I was just sitting beside my mom. I was like, no,
no,
this is too good. Like, we're good. I was like, okay, thanks. I'll just call you back. And that was the end of that. Right. So
good.
it was good that I stopped it because, like, God, who knows what would have happened. But which brings me to my next question. So we've talked about all these things, like, preventing fraud, what can you do as a person, but like, what do people do and what steps can they kind of take if they suspect they've fallen victim to fraud? Because I think that is a very underrated thing that people take for granted. Like, they think it's something so small,
Hmm.
like a marketplace scam, like, oh, that was not legit. Oh, well, like, cut my losses and move on. But I think, like,
Yeah.
it's important to highlight like what kind of steps they can take, what they can kind of do to help mitigate future fraud. But yeah, what would a person do?
Yeah, and those are some good points you're making, and I think it's underrated reporting, because, like, there's someone who actually does something with that information, right? They're keeping
Hmm.
metrics. They need to know how often it's happening, right? To see what kind of
Hmm.
resources we need to put to it. So I'll say the first step is to contact the organization, that the vector of the fraud, like that where the fraud occurred, right?
Hmm.
So if that's banking, obviously you contact your FI right away.
Yeah.
Maybe they can stop, block, reverse the payment. Obviously, plenty
Hmm.
of times, unfortunately, they can't. But
Yeah.
you always start there.
Yeah.
If the fraud occurred on Facebook or Amazon, contact their fraud departments, report it, check out their website, follow their protocol. And then also you want to report it to your local police.
Hmm.
Also report it to the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center we spoke about earlier.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's a good idea if it sort of involved your your computer, your laptop, or your phones
Hmm.
to get your device cleaned by like a professional IT service.
Oh,
Right? That's a good idea
yeah,
as well. Depending on
yeah.
the type of fraud, anything related to your identity or credit,
Hmm.
you may want to contact the credit bureaus, Equifax,
Yeah,
TransUnion, report the incident, sign up for credit monitoring.
yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say is, you should probably do it proactively. But if you
Hmm.
haven't, especially if you've suspected you've been a victim, is you want to strengthen the security around your important accounts. So change
Hmm.
passwords. It's a good time now to
Yeah,
change passwords for pretty much all your important accounts.
yeah,
Call up your telecommunication provider. Make sure that the authentication to getting onto your telecom account
yeah,
is strong.
yeah.
And then you know, there's just a lot that someone could do with the basic information to get from one
Yeah.
fraud and how it can escalate to the other fraud. So,
It's so true.
yeah,
It's so true. I get so annoyed sometimes when I try to like call places and I have to be like, yes, this is me, this is my address, this is my PIN. But you know what? Like sometimes in the end, I'm like, okay, I'm glad they asked me 75 questions to get into my account because I would rather that than
absolutely.
somebody just going in and like doing that. And I know I myself, like I've set up like authentication processes like on things like so that way when I log into like any banking information, I have to do kind of like a 2SV version where, I'm putting in an authenticated number. So there's a lot of that. That brings me to my next question because I think like we talked about how, technology can both like help us, like we talked about, or help and hinder us, right? Like, so
Yeah.
social media exposes us to a lot of things, our phones, being able to click a link. But what ways can technology help us in like individual efforts to prevent fraud? I think I kind of just alluded to some of them there, but is there others, or maybe you can explain a little bit more of like what authentication means or why you would put these two-step processes in place, because I do think it can help mitigate some fraud for yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, technology is great because it could equip us with the tools to identify bad actors, allow us to
Hmm.
authenticate the real users.
Hmm.
But the downside is that the fraudsters have access to the technology as well, right? And it can make their
Hmm.
lives easier. So, like, the fraudsters are using bots to call people with
Hmm.
automated messages. They're attempting to break passwords using brute force, using the same AI bots. They could The fraudsters now could sort of change the sound of someone's voice. We've seen frauds with that. And so now
I
the
know.
fraudster sounds like a loved one. So it goes both ways. Um, and then also the technology can make us complacent, right? Because someone
Hmm.
can say, oh, I signed up for two-factor authentication. I'm protected.
Yeah.
Well, not so fast, right? Because you could still be
Yeah.
socially engineered as
Yeah.
part of a scheme to sort of make you give up that one-time password to a
Yeah.
fraudster. Like if you were directed to a spoof site or something like that, and
Hmm.
now you're putting your
Hmm.
credentials along with your one-time password onto that
Hmm.
site, and now the fraudster could take that information.
Hmm.
So no matter the technology, if the individual I think lacks the awareness, that's like
Hmm.
we've been speaking about today, they could still end up being that weakest link, and the technology can't save them. But again, like you said, it's still important to leverage what's out there, sign up for the two-factor authentication because it
Hmm.
just makes that extra step. It makes it another hurdle that the
Yeah.
fraudster needs to overcome.
Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. Because yeah, like take for granted sometimes that like things are so automatic and like you said I set up my 2SB are totally great, but there's other ways around it, so it's really about staying vigilant. And I think that's like the whole point of why
Mhm.
we're kind of doing this today, is to educate people, to let them know they're not alone. Like, don't feel shame if you fall victim for fraud, to fraud. There's ways that can help you out of it. There's ways that you can prevent it. And I think like it's really important. I think the message that both our organizations are trying to implement is it starts with you. Like, it really does start with you. The
Absolutely.
same way that, you don't want all your money to go missing. You don't want to click a link. You don't want to have your computer filled with, hackers or whatever it might be. Like, you want to be the first line of defense. Like, you want to make sure you are taking charge of your own stuff. Like I said, like I've set up two-factor authentication. Like, I'm just trying to be aware. We talked about social media being a place of like potential scams can happen, but it is also a really great place to share information or share stories, reporting it, like you said, because you may think it's like, oh, I fell victim to this, like, oh, whatever, it's not a big deal. I didn't lose anything out of it, but report that because
Yes,
there could be like 100 other people
exactly.
that are experiencing the same thing, and like knowing where our resources should be put and focused on. So it may seem small and minuscule to you. It may be a very big thing that happens to you, but it's important to report it, note it, understand that there are agencies out there. There are people like you that are trying to
Tracking.
educate and
Yeah,
mitigate and track it. So that way we can kind of stay ahead of these fraudsters. I mean, they're ever changing. I joke all the time. I'm like, just go get a job. Like, isn't this more work?
right.
Like, doesn't it seem like it's more work to do? Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Wouldn't you just rather a 9 to 5 and go home? I don't know. It's
right.
obviously lucrative, but there's there's uh there's there's a reason why they're doing it, right? So, if you've fallen victim to fraud or simply you just want to boost your fraud IQ, there are multiple resources. We talked about a lot of them today. So, I will link kind of the shared resources in which we both operate. Like, I'll link some CUMIS information, I'll link some Tandia stuff, as well as like the Anti Fraud Center, CRA, places that you can go
Perfect.
and get
Yeah.
some more information. Joel, thank you so much. Like your expertise, you shedding the light on the importance of fraud awareness and prevention, especially during March, Fraud Awareness Month. You know, it's about understanding common signs, taking proactive measures in our daily lives, and your insights today really did provide invaluable guidance. And as individuals, staying vigilant and informed is key in safeguarding our financial security, for sure. And with experts like you leading the charge, we can definitely navigate this landscape a little bit better with some tactics and confidence, and really just remain proactive. And we're all in this together. So trying to mitigate it, trying to be proactive, trying to you know strengthen numbers, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. Oh,
so thank
my
you. This was great.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me. It was fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
Visit us online for more fraud tips. At Tandia, we are here to help.